Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome to this week's short sermon. We've all experienced letdowns across all video games and franchises. Whether they are little ones that is really nothing more than a passing thought or annoyance, or big ones that shape the way that we view an entire game, if you have any expectations going into a video game, you will experience at least some letdowns. Although I love Fallout dearly, I have had my own fair share of letdowns, and here I am going to talk about one of my more frivolous ones, but damn if it didn't sting in the moment and leave me with a bitter taste in my mouth. So what could have possibly gotten my rad undies in such a twist that I felt the need to make an entire video about it? It's the Syringer in Fallout 4. Okay. Before you click away, pause, or comment below, let me explain. Although I didn't know this during my first playthrough of Fallout 4, all the way back in 2015, the Syringer would become symbolic of how I would feel about many aspects of Fallout 4. It was, in a way, a microcosm of the game. It was also the very first memorable disappointment. So, let's talk about why the Fallout 4 Syringer sucks, why it was such a big deal to me, and how the Syringer can be associated with many failings in Fallout 4. Something I've come to refer to as Syringer Syndrome. So, in case you don't know what the Syringer is, or maybe you do, but you don't know much about it, the Fallout 4 loading screen that features it sums things up nicely. It calls the Syringer a rare and custom-made weapon that can shoot modified syringes at an enemy, who then suffer from the effects of whatever is in the syringe. That is pretty straightforward, although I have to call BS on the rare part, since it can be found 13 different ways, either just at a location, bought from certain vendors, or at the end of marked and unmarked quests. This isn't a deep dive into the weapon. I will save that for one of my breakdown videos, but it's worth mentioning a few things. Rather disappointingly, there are not many in-game mods for the weapon, which stands in contrast to the emphasis that Fallout 4 put on weapon modification. But the Syringer's real secret sauce isn't in the mods, it's in the number of syringes and their myriad of effects. The Berserk syringe will frenzy a target, leading them to attack anyone around them. The Bleed Out syringe will do bleeding damage. Endanger All syringe reduces a target's damage. Lock Joint syringe will paralyze a target. Mind Cloud syringe will cause targets to be unable to spot you. The Pax syringe pacifies targets. The Rad Scorpion Venom syringe does poison damage. The Yellow Belly syringe will make a target flee. And lastly, the Bloatfly syringe will cause a bloatfly to spawn upon the death of the enemy. There are some pretty interesting effects in there, causing paralysis, causing a frenzy, and what's that about a bloatfly? It bursts out of an enemy upon their death like some sort of xenomorph. Man, some of these sound like they could be pretty fun to mess around with. One of my favorite things in any game, not just Fallout, is to have an intriguing, novel, and open-ended mechanic. This can be done in many forms, and I have a number of examples throughout my years of playing games. The self-guided missile from 007 Nightfire, the general powers in Command & Conquer Generals, the chainsaw bayonets in Gears of War, the Nemesis system in Shadow of Mordor, and to bring it back to Fallout, the Mesmetron in Fallout 3. I wasted so much time sneaking around, seeing who I could enslave and who I couldn't, watching NPCs aggro, save scumming, having their heads explode, and slowly walking away like I had no idea what just happened. It was great fun, good memories, and something that really satisfied my natural curiosity and compulsion to test the limits. These novel, open-ended mechanics stick with me and help color my perception of games, even if they are just ancillary and not a main component of the game. So on my first playthrough of Fallout 4, all those years ago now, when I saw the Syringer, I just knew that I had to take that baby out for a spin. I immediately started to justify a whole story and build around it. Maybe Nate had an education as a chemist, and this was his way of releasing his inner mad scientist. Perhaps he was a medic in the army, who took a vow to do no harm and therefore sticks to using non-lethal methods of overcoming enemies. Ooh, what if on one of my future playthroughs, I could do a full pacifist run? And so my mind was off to the races, thinking of all the possibilities with this old and not so shiny toy. So the first thing I had to do was get some ammo for it. I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised to find out that all the ammo for the weapon has to be crafted. Being so early on in the game, I didn't have the resources to make much of any of the ammo types, so I loaded up on what I could and went forth, eager to test the weapon and scavenge for materials to make more ammo. With only 2 types of ammo, the pack syringe and bleed out syringe, I came upon some super mutants and decided to try and pacify them, while I ran in and looted some beautiful, beautiful junk. Well, since the stock sights on the weapon aren't great, I ended up missing a few times, and when I eventually hit one of the mutants, he did indeed get pacified. I quickly ran in, knowing I only had 30 seconds, but found another super mutant, and had no more pack syringes to pacify him. At risk of being killed, I loaded the bleeding syringe and shot the mutant, to watch his health bar barely move. I shot again after the fairly slow reload, and again, he still had most of his health. It was at this moment I realized I wasn't going to survive unless I used real weapons. And finally, I was able to kill all the super mutants. Okay, so that was kind of a failure, but I loaded up on all sorts of junk and went back to make more ammo and build what weapon mods I could, starting with sights. Using all my resources, I struck out again with a similar goal in mind: use the syringer, get junk to craft more syringes, and profit. The only thing was, I had to keep falling back on my normal weapons. Useful effects either had a low duration or an unsatisfactory chance of being successful. Damaging attacks in most cases were barely enough to take down one target, and if there was more than one, and there usually was, then the syringer was just not hacking it. Disappointed in my inability to use the syringer to any effect, I went back to the drawing board and looked at what parts of my build could be changed to maximize my effectiveness. I went and looked to see what perks I should invest in and was aghast at my choices. I had one perk that I could use to enhance my syringer build. Well, technically 2, but the second one was Gun Nut that just gave me access to better mods, which were already pretty sparse, with 3 barrel mods, 3 stock mods, and a bunch of sight mods. Not all that helpful, and the only perk that actually applies is Sniper, which can reduce sway, have a chance at a knockdown for single action rifles, and can get a 25% boost to accuracy for headshots and VATs. That's it. Well, so much for my syringer build. Even if I was completely invested in the build to grind out all the junk to craft ammo that cannot be bought anywhere, not even from the vendors that sell the weapon, spam weak, low endurance, and chance-based ammo at targets that only get tougher as I level up, all in the name of a pacifist run, I would still end up being sorely disappointed. Despite the hope that Fallout 4 would take a lot of the things fans loved about New Vegas and implement it in our new, shiny, and much better looking Fallout 4, a good chunk of this hope was just false. A true pacifist run of no deaths is simply not feasible. The second best pacifist run, where things die, but technically not by you, in the most save scummy, exploit-ridden methods imaginable. And it is obvious that such a playstyle was not thought of or intended by Bethesda. Almost half of the syringer ammo possibilities are pacifist in nature: paralyzing, mind cloud, pacification, and a fleeing effect. And this cannot be used for an honest, intended pacifist playthrough. I held onto the syringer for a while in my inventory, but found myself not using it very often due to the pretty weak effects, and eventually storing it in a settlement because it was taking up too much space. It is funny to talk about how disappointed I was in just one of many weapons in the entirety of Fallout 4. To have such strong feelings for something that can go by completely unnoticed by players, and it wouldn't matter one iota. The syringer would go on to sit there in my settlement, mocking me every time I would go through all my items. A reminder of how hope and expectations collide with reality in unpredictable ways. Is it silly to have such a small thing stick out so much in my memory? Is it fair that I put an inordinate amount of weight on one single tiny little thing? Something that, moving forward, would color my overall perception of Fallout 4, even though it pales in comparison to all the other aspects of the game. Most likely, yes, but I hope you can see how the syringer parallels so much of what we, as existing fans of the franchise, felt like and went through when first playing Fallout 4. I know the slogan of the game is "Coming Home," and I do feel like that is an appropriate slogan for a game that had been anticipated for so long by so many. In a lot of ways, Fallout 4 was like coming home. But I think much of the fanbase has also come up with an unofficial slogan of sorts. Missed opportunity. How many times have you heard that phrase used when talking about cut content, like the underwater vault, an actual combat zone that the player could fight in, rather than just being a shooting gallery? Having the option for getting Dance promoted to Elder of the Brotherhood, or convincing him to join the Railroad, or really not even cut content, just the stuff we got in-game not being fleshed out fully, like the Institute's actions and motives not aligning very well, having interesting raider groups and bosses, but no real interesting dynamics or consequences with them, or making the Railroad really feel like a cloak and dagger operation rather than a haggard group surviving by the skin of their teeth, hiding behind a door with the uncrackable password that was their own group's name. Even the concept art showed more thoughts and intentions than we got in-game, which is extremely common for many items in Fallout 4. For many fans, Fallout 4 was something to be optimistic about, and what details we did know prior to release just elevated those expectations even more. The possibilities seemed endless, and it was hard not to dream up what these possibilities could be. Much like me and the Syringer, the initial excitement and hope abated with time, and after a certain amount of gameplay, it became clear where some of those expectations overshot the end product. My silly Syringer experience is therefore a pretty good analogy for how many came to feel about Fallout 4. A wellspring of enthusiasm and hopeful optimism that slowly over time ossified as we became aware of how wrong we were in a number of ways. For me, Fallout 4 ended up being the most poignant example of Syringer syndrome. Made you check the video length, didn't I? Be honest. Well, the story is not over yet, because in true Fallout fan fashion, Syringer syndrome truly is a great analogy to Fallout 4, because a lot of talented and passionate fans take matters into their own hands and get to making mods. Although there are a few Syringer mods, I went with this one, the SRO Syringer overhaul by, this guy. Cheers, mate. And just, man, it takes what I had hoped for and dials almost all of it to 11. Although I didn't dislike the overall design of the weapon, in fact, a part of me liked it, probably because it reminded me of another love of my life, paintball. This mod gives it so many more visual customization options. It adds even more weapon mods to customize it in almost any way you like, lets it benefit from a few more perks, which maybe is still a little bit lacking, but gives 26 different syringes, all with different effects. 26! Wow! And not only have extra effects been added, the effects of existing syringes have been changed as well, making them a lot more useful, and the Syringer as a whole, an actual viable weapon to play the game with. I genuinely enjoyed running around and testing all the different syringes, although I found it difficult sometimes to not kill the target outright because the Syringer is much more capable as a weapon. Sure, it doesn't address the hackiness around running a true pacifist build, because that would require a whole game overhaul. But on the roller coaster of emotions, I'm just happy with the view at this height, considering how utterly disappointed I was before. Modders have given us many of the opportunities we had hoped for when first playing Fallout 4, breathing new life into a game that has meant many things for lots of different people. We owe a lot to the modding community and their dedication, because it shows that some of the things that we want to see and experience in games is certainly doable. I don't want to get into the back and forth about whether or not an active modding scene de-incentivizes Bethesda to put out good work, but the entire story of Fallout 4 just wouldn't be complete without mentioning the effects of our dedicated modders. I also want to say this is not a video meant to attack Fallout 4. I honestly really like Fallout 4, and I do consider it a good Fallout game. I think we can acknowledge the shortcomings of even our favorite games and franchises while still liking them. Nothing quite says I love something more than crapping all over it. So I hope the next time you play through Fallout 4 and complete the hole-in-the-wall quest in Vault 81, where Dr. Forsyth hands you the Syringer for saving the kid, come on, you know you're gonna save the kid. And I hope you look at the weapon a little differently, because it's a symbol of the worthwhile journey that is Fallout 4.